Protesters gather outside detention centers across the United States ahead of planned raids aimed at deporting illegal immigrants. Those raids are expected to begin on Sunday. People across the U.S. state of Louisiana are bracing for Tropical Storm Barry, which is expected to reach hurricane status and make landfall later today. And a transition deal aimed at breaking the deadlock in Sudan is expected to be signed today between the ruling military council and a pro-democracy coalition. Welcome back to the France 24 newsroom in Paris. I'm Tom Burgess-Watson. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. First, it's expected that the U.S. authorities are 24 hours away from starting the process of arresting and deporting at least 2,000 immigrant families in a series of nationwide raids. All those raids have long been threatened by President Donald Trump. And with that in mind, protesters have gathered outside detention centers across the United States, in particular at this facility in Florida, which houses unaccompanied children who cross the U.S.-Mexico border. Well, critics say the policy and the planned raids are inhumane. France 24's Colin Kinneborough has more on those raids.
A long-threatened crackdown set to start on Sunday. The Trump administration is expected to undertake nationwide immigration raids, arresting migrants who have received prior deportation orders. The operation is set to target 10 major U.S. cities, including Chicago, Los Angeles, New York, and Miami.
There's nothing to be secret about. It starts on Sunday, and they're going to take people out, and they're going to bring them back to their countries.
The operation would mark a scaled-up version of raids that have been carried out regularly since 2003, and that often result in hundreds of arrests. Trump had originally threatened such a crackdown in June, but postponed the operation amid negotiations with Democrats over an emergency funding package for border enforcement. Administration officials say there is a chance the raids could be postponed again. But activists aren't taking their chances. The American Civil Liberties Union filed a preemptive lawsuit Thursday, seeking to protect immigrants' rights to due process in court. In Chicago, Mayor Lori Lightfoot has said that police won't cooperate with immigration enforcement. She also accused Trump of fear-mongering, a view shared by immigrants' rights groups.
Immigration raids in our community are something that's very traumatic. And so when they announce them ahead of time, I think part of the intent is to sow chaos in our community.
In response, advocacy groups have been distributing Know Your Rights guides, circulating information about hotlines, and planning public demonstrations. They say their goal is not to alarm, but to alert immigrant communities.
Now, millions of people across the southern U.S. state of Louisiana are currently bracing for Tropical Storm Barry, expected to reach hurricane status before making landfall later in the day. It then threatens the Lash, Louisiana, and its largest city, New Orleans, with potentially disastrous rainfall and flooding. Well, President Trump has declared a state of emergency there in Louisiana. Let's take a closer look.
Nighttime, and New Orleans may look calm. But off the Louisiana coast, the winds from Tropical Storm Barry are approaching hurricane speeds. By late Friday, they topped 100 kilometers per hour, and residents are taking extra precautions. Floodgates are up, and supermarket shelves have been emptied as people stock up on supplies. Many in smaller towns along the coast have evacuated.
This happened in minutes, in hours. We live in an area where it's one way in and it's one way out. If you get trapped there.
Tropical Storm Barry is still circling in the Gulf of Mexico, but it's expected to make landfall by early Saturday local time. By then, it is predicted to turn into a hurricane. President Trump has declared a state of emergency for Louisiana, with officials warning that severe flooding posed the greatest danger.
If Tropical Storm Barry becomes a hurricane, as we fully expect it will, this will be the first time that we've had a hurricane make landfall in Louisiana while the Mississippi River was at flood stage. And it isn't just the Mississippi River. We have elevated river levels across Louisiana.
Heavy rains from an earlier storm already hit New Orleans on Wednesday, flooding streets after just 3 hours. 14 years ago, Hurricane Katrina devastated New Orleans and its region, killing 1,800 people. The city's new post-Katrina flood defenses are about to be put to the test.
In other world news, amidst rising tensions between the United States and Iran, the head of Lebanon's Hezbollah has issued a warning, saying that a war with Iran could result in Israel's destruction. Well, Hassan Nasrallah added that his goal is to prevent such a war from starting in the first place. Well, Hezbollah is considered to be a terrorist organization by the United States, and it is the only faction not to have disarmed after Lebanon's civil war, which ended in 1990. France 24's Alison Sargent has more.
Speaking to Hezbollah's TV station, the group's leader, Hassan Nasrallah, said that he's being solicited for dialogue from an unexpected source, longtime foe, the United States.
Trump's administration is seeking to open communication channels through mediators. These are the American pragmatists.
The Trump administration has not yet confirmed whether or not they've been reaching out to Iran-backed Hezbollah. Earlier this week, Washington imposed new sanctions on several of the group's politicians in the Lebanese parliament, a widening of the U.S. campaign against Hezbollah, which it regards as a terrorist organization. Both Hezbollah and the U.S. have been involved in fighting in Syria, with Nasrallah's forces giving their support to Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. The Hezbollah leader now says he's lowered the number of fighters in the country.
Our forces are still in all the areas that they existed in before, but we reduced the number of forces based on the needs of the current situation.
With tensions flaring between Washington and Tehran, the Hezbollah leader also warned that his ally Iran is capable of wiping out U.S. ally Israel in the event that fighting breaks out. Hoping to prevent a military confrontation, on Friday, the Democrat-led House of Representatives voted to limit Donald Trump's ability to attack Iran. But the measure is unlikely to make it past the Senate, controlled by the president's Republican Party.
Now, a senior diplomat at the African Union says that a transition deal between Sudan's ruling military council and a pro-democracy coalition is on track to be signed today. Well, the interim leadership will oversee that transition period until such time as elections are organised, which is expected to be in about 3 years from now. Well, let's hope that the deal will break the deadlock which has gripped Sudan ever since April, when the longtime leader Omar al-Bashir was overthrown.
A deal meant to break the political deadlock that has gripped Sudan since the overthrow of its autocratic former president, Omar al-Bashir. Yet how much breathing room it leaves for the country's pro-democracy movement is still to be seen. A violent crackdown by security forces on a pro-democracy demonstration in Khartoum earlier last month left more than 100 people dead, according to protest organisers. Since then, a deal has been brokered between Sudan's military council and protesters with the help of a mediator from Ethiopia. On Friday, he announced that the agreement had been finalised and talks would resume on Saturday in an attempt to agree on a constitutional declaration and sign the deal.
The political document has been agreed upon unanimously. What is left is a proclamation which establishes the transitional period or the transition into a civilian government. This shall be debated on, discussed, and signed at the same time.
In the ensuing weeks since the army crackdown, however, protesters have stayed in the streets, demanding that the generals hand over power to civilian leadership. This week, Sudan's military announced that an attempted coup d'etat took place late on Thursday, an attempt, it claims, to undermine the transition deal. As it stands, the accord comprises a power-sharing deal with the army leading for the first 21 months, followed by a civilian leader for the next 18. On top of this, the military council has agreed to investigating the Khartoum massacre.
Well, that brings us up to date with the world news. Thank you for watching. Stay with us here on France 24.